Hi preschoolers! Today I'd like to read you the story of The Race of the Birkebeiners. It was written by Lise Lunge-Larsen and illustrated by Mary Azarian. It's a story about skiing and being very brave. The Birkebeiners were the fiercest and bravest warriors that ever lived in Norway. They could fight on land as well as at sea. They could hide for weeks on end in the woods without getting caught, and they could sleep through snowstorms by burying themselves in drifts and putting their shields on top for protection. The Birkebeiners were the king's loyal men. They despised the Baglers, those rich nobles and false bishops who wanted to line their pockets with the peasants' money. The Birkebeiners, you see, were mostly peasants. When they went into battle, they wore no costly armor, just birch bark wrapped around their legs, so they were called Birkebeiners, which meant birch-leggers. This story begins on Christmas Eve in the year 1206 at a small wooden farm belonging to the district governor, a proud Birkebeiner. All the folk at the farm had gathered to celebrate Holy Night, and the little house glowed with the light of dozens of candles. A bright fire burned in the center of the room, and a thick layer of straw covered the floor. Tonight, everyone from the smallest little herd boy to the master and mistress of the house would sleep together in the straw in memory of the Christ child born in a stable so long ago. The governor had just lifted his drinking horn and a toast when there was a knock at the door. Quickly, the men reached for their swords. Ever since the death of the king a year and a half ago, the Baglers had been raiding Birkebeiner farms. But surely they wouldn't come to kill them on Christmas Eve. They look very nervous. Grabbing his battle axe, the governor went to the door and bellowed, "Who comes?" "It's Sira Trond," came the answer. "Sira Trond, come in! You frightened us." The priest stepped in and shook the snow from his cloak. "What brings you so far from home on Christmas Eve?" asked the governor. Sira Trond reached out a hand, and a young woman carrying a baby stepped inside. "This is Inga of Varteig and Prince Håkon," he said. You see the baby? Now the Birkebeiners had heard that the prince was born 3 weeks after the death of the king, but they had never expected to see the baby alive. Surely the Baglers who wanted a king of their own on the throne had killed him, and yet here he was. I have hidden them for over a year," explained Sira Trond, "but now the Baglers have become so strong in the south and their raids so frequent, we had to escape, and so we came here." "You are welcome," said the governor. "Stay as long as you like." But even the home of the governor was not safe for long. Almost overnight, the Baglers had learned of their escape and were coming after them on horses. There was no time to lose. They had to flee north to Nidaros, where the many Birkebeiner chieftains could protect them. To outwit the Baglers, they would ski across the mountains to the east and head north to Nidaros from there. The Baglers would never imagine them crossing those mountains, for they were some of the tallest and stormiest in all of Norway. The small group would be leaving at the darkest and coldest time of the year, and they would travel when hosts of evil spirits roamed the land looking for unprotected humans to snatch up. But there was no other way. They had to cross those mountains if they were to save Prince Håkon from the Baglers. Sira Trond, Inga, and Håkon went immediately to a small town called Lillehammer. There, 8 Birkebeiners joined them, including Torstein Skavla and Shervil Skruka, 2 of the best skiers in all of Norway. Torstein was big and broad, with immense arms and legs. A red beard covered his face. Shervil was fair and clean-shaven, with playful eyes. Tall and slender, he almost flew on top of the snow and easily kept up with Torstein's powerful skiing. For years they had raced each other for fun, and now they would race to defeat the Baglers. After a hasty meal of dried mutton, flatbread, barley, porridge, and strong ale, everyone was ready to ski. Although they hoped to avoid battle, they wrapped birch bark on top of their breeches, pulled iron helmets over their skin caps, and fetched spears, axes, and shields. Inga made herself ready too. She put on a beautiful wool cloak over her long dress and pinned on a magnificent gold brooch. It was a gift from King Håkon before he died. Baby Håkon would nestle down in a sheepskin bag with the wool on the inside. Inga would carry him on her back. This is her brooch. It's another name for a pin. And there's Prince Håkon. He's going to go in a bag on her back. And there's Torstein, and there's Sherval. They're getting ready to ski. And this is where they're tying on the birch bark on their legs to keep safe from the Baglers. Last, they pulled out their long hand-carved skis, slipped their boots into the leather bindings, and grabbed one pole each. "Come Idjin, let's make haste," urged Torstein, and quickly, silently, they skied off. The moon shone brightly, illuminating the mountains, which rose up in front of them like giant trolls. The Birkebeiners were glad that the priest, Siratrand, had decided to come too, for the only thing the evil spirits feared was the cross. That night they skied past farms, through black spruce forests, and into the high mountains where only dwarf birches and small bent pines grew. Toward morning they rested at a mountain farm called Seder. A biting wind gusted up when they set out again. Soon heavy snow began to fall. The farther they skied into the mountains, the faster and fiercer the snow fell. It blinded their eyes and stung their cheeks, but they hunched their shoulders and skied on. All day they struggled. When darkness fell, the storm only strengthened. They were high above the tree line where nothing blocked the force of the wind and snow. They could barely see the tips of their own skis. At last their guide stopped. "I don't know where we are," he said. "We shall have to dig a shelter in the snow and wait out the storm." "This storm could last for days," said Torstein. "Håkon will never survive. Let me take him and ski ahead. I can ski faster alone, and the baby must be brought to a warm shelter soon." "I will go with you," said Sherval. Inga regarded the two men. Then she looked down at Prince Håkon. Since his birth, the two of them had never been apart. If she gave him up now, she might never see him again. Quickly she loosened a silver cross from around her neck and stuffed it into Håkon's sheepskin bag for protection. Then she handed her baby to Torstein. It was her only chance to save her son's life. That's very brave of Inga to trust those skiers to take her baby and keep him safe. The big man took the child awkwardly into his arms, for he had never held a baby before. He strapped him to his chest, and then he secured his shield on top to protect the prince from the wind. "Go now, we will follow," said Siratrand. "If God is willing, we will see you again before long." The two Birkebeiners turned into the wind and pushed off, Sherval breaking trail and Torstein with the baby following after. They fought their way up the vast open snowfields, up and up and up, always leaning into the wind, always keeping pace with each other. When they finally reached the top of the mountain, the snow had become so deep it almost reached their thighs. Never before in all their years of racing had they skied so hard. Weariness had slowed them down when suddenly Sherval yelled and lurched forward into the snow. His skis had hit something. Quickly, both men kicked off their skis and started to dig. They dug and scraped until they found the door to a barn that was completely buried in snow. Can you see the top of the barn? The snow is so high it went over the top of the roof of the barn. Once inside, Sherval made a fire with his flint and steel. Torstein lifted Håkon out of his fur. He was so cold and white that at first Torstein thought that he had died, but then the baby started to move and whimper a little. Sherval looked up from the fire. "Look, he's hungry," he said, pointing to Håkon, who was sucking his thumb as hard as he could. "All we have is snow," said Torstein. So Sherval fetched snow and fed the baby lump after tiny lump to melt in his mouth. Soon a fire was burning and the two men curled up to sleep, Håkon snug in Torstein's arms. In the middle of the night there was a loud noise outside and the door burst open. In came the rest of the Birkebeiners with Inga at the head. They had found the barn. After 3 long days, the storm died down. The skiers had nothing but snow to eat, but they skied on, down the mountain, and that night they reached the valley below. Here they rested before traveling to Nidaros, where the Birkebeiner chieftains welcomed them. Now, if this were a fairy tale, the story would be over, but this story is true, and what happened next is perhaps the most miraculous of all. The Baglers would not give up looking for ways to get rid of Prince Håkon. They started a rumor through Norway that he was not the true son of the king, and demanded that Inga undergo the ordeal of the burning irons. For months the rumors spread and grew. Finally, to prove that her son was indeed the true prince, Inga agreed to the test. And now there was nothing the Birkebeiners could do to save their little prince except watch. The day before the ordeal, Inga and the Birkebeiners arrived at Christ Church in Bergen. All day and all night they prayed while sentries stood guard around the small wooden church. At dawn, the door flung open. In came the Bagler chieftains and the bishops to bear witness. A man carrying the burning irons with a pair of tongs came toward Inga, and she rose to meet him. Carefully he placed the hot, glowing irons in her open hands. The witnesses grew still, and Inga uttered no sound. Slowly she turned around and carried the irons the length of the church. At the altar she placed them on the ground, and a nun stepped forward to wrap her hands with strips of cloth. If, in 3 days' time, her hands showed burn marks, she would be deemed a liar, and Håkon stripped of his right to the throne. Three days later, when the last cloth was removed, a gasp went up from the gathering. Inga's hands showed not a trace of a burn. In fact, they were even more beautiful than before. All knew they had witnessed a miracle. It was as though God himself had spoken to them and said, "Prince Håkon shall be king." Prince Håkon did become king. He became the most powerful king that Norway had during the Middle Ages. He lived to a great age and brought peace, unity, and prosperity to his country. His reign has been called Norway's Golden Years. And yet it is the story of his rescue that is best remembered. Every year in Norway and every year in the United States, thousands of men and women line up at the start of a grueling cross-country ski race called the Birkebeiner. In Norway, these men and women ski part of Inga and the Birkebeiners' journey. They even carry an 8-pound pack, symbolic of the weight of the baby. All who race do it to test their own strength and endurance, but also to honor the courage of the men and the women who risk their lives to save a young prince and bring peace to their country. That's the end of the story of the race of the Birkebeiners.